find the minimum list for the routing or for the underlay that is required. So this list also will be used in the test cases, and we will also implement this in BMV2. What do you think about this?
Yes, and in the routing CAPI mapping, that area, if we can go a little bit more into details and see what is missing in terms of routing, MAC resolution, and document that, then it will be much more helpful for everyone.
I think Marian's suggestion is minimal routing is input port equals output port. If you try to configure anything else, it won't do it.
Yeah, but right. So the only way you can configure something else is that you won't have a default route on both ports. If you want to have like some specific prefixes and then you expect the port to go to expect the packet with a particular underlay destination to go to a defined port based on your configuration, no, it won't work. And I don't think we need to support this.
So exactly how do you want it to support? Sorry, Vincent, please go
ahead. You mentioned default route, or I mean, are we just trying to build the Ethernet header and that's it, or more than that?
Yeah, basically that's it.
Well, I mean, you can do a prefix lookup to know where it's going and also what the Ethernet area is, or you can just limit to Ethernet header. But I don't know. No, for me, it's just basic routing. You look the prefix, gives you the port and the destination MAC. And
yeah, but it's not that simple. And you want to map this properly to SAI APIs. Either you do the full mapping to the prefix, to the next hop, to the neighbor, and then I don't know, FDB, whatever, or we only say that we have an assumption that two ports are connected to a gateway, and the only thing they have is a default gateway, and we don't care which port the packet egresses as long as the destination MAC is a proper one.
Okay, so what you mentioned first is what the Intel test cases do, but you're right, there's a choice there.
So, but Marian, just to be clear here, so anyway, so here, even with this minimal support, that port will be, you know, sent back from the same interface, right? So default routing, I understand it's something that complicated in the BMV2 this moment and doesn't work, but next hop neighbor is something that's can also be added, right?
Any place is walking distance if you have the time. Is it worth the time? I think it's Marian's point. Is it worth the time to do that?
So
why?
Andy, we definitely, you know, want to use the same test cases across BMV2 and hardware. That is the only goal. Based on that, you know, if there is a small amount of work that is needed, so we don't have to change the test cases for BMV2 and hardware that everyone can use, it will be really helpful, right?
I think Marian is saying volunteer to do that work, that small amount of work, and show them how small amount of work it is, and maybe he'll consider it.
Yeah, it's like I'm not the maintainer. Anyone can contribute this code, but I think it's useless. That's my point. Like, can you give me a test case for underlay that tests something except how the egress packet will look like, which is done by the overlay pipeline? Like, what exactly do you want to test except I agree that we need to be able to accept the API calls. Like, what would be the pass criteria for the underlay testing for DPU?
So at the first point, so we want to have this configuration in the test case to configure the routing, just to, you know, be able to run the same test case on the hardware without any modification at all.
Yeah, run the config part.
This is okay. Yes, this is the config point. This is important. But once there is a traffic, so probably there is few points where we tested, but I need to check it so I can send it to you. But I think maybe it can be like a basics tests can be there that just verify that routing also passes, on your hardware.
Like for instance, assuming we have the intended configuration where 2 ports are configured to have a default route.
Do you mean with the default routes or with the case like in the BMV2 where we send the packet from one port?
No, I'm talking about the real config, right? The real configuration is that you have a DPU plugged into 2 switches that will advertise default routes to a DPU. So how will you test this traffic?
Well, so I think that we do not test this currently.
And what do you test in
No. So the first thing for the underlay, as I said, is to have the configuration of the routing correctly. That in this case will work on the BMV2 and the hardware. So we don't want to have the if else or modification of this case to be able to perform it on the hardware. This is the first thing. So we do not do in the PTF test cases that we have in the dash, which assume testing called overlay, right? So we don't do too much underlay testing there. So for the underlay testing, there is a different set of the PTF test cases on the SAI repo, which you can take it and run it, right?
Yeah,
so there is a bunch of them.
Which has like some assumptions about topology that you have uplinks, downlinks, they're different.
So we have ported that, Marianne, for Dash, some of the test cases, and the device that has fewer ports. Yeah, a lot of work has gone there as well.
Yeah, so there is.
Can I ask why? Because really, you almost have a lag. You have L3 lag. You have ECMP for any IP packet.
I guess one way to think about this is let's say Volodymyr, let's say you configure the default route and all that, right? And in the implementation, the BMV2 implementation, we just ignore all that, right, and continue to do what we do today, which is just send it back out on the same port where the packet arrived. I think the question, what Marian is trying to ask is, the test would still work, right?
Can we
because
define
all
the
it's looking for
requirements?
is the packet coming out.
You're all talking about test cases, behavior. Let's define the requirements. You got BMV2, you also have vendor specific flow or code, right? Not using BMV2 necessary. I mean, we need to have what you expect. What is the behavior you expect? Define that first.
Behavior is, I think the behavior is clear, right? We have to have SAI, basic SAI routing, but I think what we're trying to do here is from the BMV2 perspective, what minimal thing needs to be implemented. So my question is,
the proposal here is,
so my question is,
go ahead.
Yeah, so just my question was, so if the intention is to have the same test case to be able to run for both BMV2 and hardware. So let's say the test case actually goes and configures the routing and all that, but the implementation of the BMV2 implementation just simply ignores all that, right? And it just sends out the packet back out on the same interface that it's received on. The test would still work, right? Because based on what, I agree with what Marian is saying, because if it's a default route, if you assume that the configuration is always a default route, that's pointing to both the interfaces, right? Which is what is the configuration requirement if you assume from Microsoft, then the test would still work. And the only gap that I see is the underlay MAC address that was pushed that needs to somehow be encoded in the packet. The interface selection itself doesn't seem to matter so much. I think that's what Marian is also making the point, that the current way should still work fine.
So we just need a MAC lookup.
I think the proposal, go ahead.
We just need one lookup table added then, and the API to program it.
Yeah, if we could somehow plumb in the MAC address that was passed in via the SAI existing SAI API and get that into the underlay MAC of the dash pipe BMV2 pipeline, I think we are good to go, right?
Do we just need a P4 table that implements just enough such that the code gets kind of auto-generated?
Yeah, we have something like
No,
an
we don't
appliance
need to
table or something
auto-generate
today,
that.
but
Underlay
we don't
doesn't.
need we don't need to auto-generate. Yeah, just
We'll just copy. We'll just do some hard-coded API
yeah.
like we're doing for switch attributes and whatnot.
Yeah.
There are writings API. Not sure what we need to create. Anyway.
So
Well,
The
what
if I
API
understand,
is something we can reuse, right? But would the P4 need any modification to make sure this works? Or is it not needed?
It might
if
be
there's no
slight modification
table to
because
set the
it's just
DMAC address, it might need that.
So go ahead.
If there's no table currently in P4 to set the DMAC address, it would need that probably.
yeah.
Right.
Currently, they just zeros and that's it.
Well, my point about the auto generation was if we add a table, then we need the libsci to be able to program that table, and the more we can do automatically, the better, right? If that's possible.
Oh, this is the question. Oh, yeah, it's possible to do automatically. So yeah, it would be great.
Yeah, I mean the infrastructure is already there. I don't know if we've done it for non-dash APIs yet, but to have to manually program all that P4 runtime translation would be annoying, right? Let's try to do this in a way that just comes right out of the P4 code if possible.
Yeah, that's where I disagree. I think if API is given beforehand, then it's better to connect it manually because it's just one table, really.
Okay, whoever wants to do that work, I guess that's a choice, right? That's fine.
Yeah, probably that's a better answer, right? So if someone can come up with some automatic way, please do. I see a manual path, a shorter one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And
So
easier
the,
later on understand.
So the behavior we're talking about, the packet being sent to the output port. Sorry. A packet coming in being sent to the same port on output. Are we saying that that is a simplification only for the BMV2?
Real hardware would have to be more flexible.
Yes, that's right.
But the BMV2 would not, and the dash tests for.
Yeah, but it's still a correct behavior. I think that's the point because network doesn't care.
Yep.
Even the configuration in the test case again will stay the same, and it will work on a real hardware in that case.
So on the real hardware, you're saying, say with a 2-port DPU, you want to be able to send packets in one port and have them come out the other. That's the desire. That's the requirement.
Yeah.
And how do you choose the
requirement is ECMP?
Yes.
The requirement is ECMP. We have underlay configured as both ports are equal cost. So do whatever you want to balance your egress traffic on those.
Yeah, so the ECMP also like configuration will need to be later on added, right?
So if that is ECMP, that's what we want, but the BMV2 model is doing simplification. Whatever we need to do this actual writing on the hardware is not generated, right?
Yeah, because I don't believe we want to test the load balancing.
I'm not talking testing. I'm talking. You got a set of API with functionality. You want various various code to work. You BM2 or vendor specific or hardware or whatever, the same way, right? So.
Not exactly, because hashing for ECMP is not equal across implementations.
I know routing can be complex with multiple levels and all that, which I don't think we agree on.
I'm talking
anyway,
specifically about choosing the egress port. It's not for the same packet. It won't be the same for different vendors, even for switches. We don't have a uniform algorithm.
I think if I can, so I think what's being proposed here is dash tests that test, group-based ACLs and all kind of stuff. Assume a simple routing configuration that the BMV2 implements. That will work on BMV2 in this simple configuration. It'll work on hardware in a very simple configuration. If you want to test underlay, use different tests. It'll only work on hardware. It won't work on BMV2.
Yeah, so for underlay testing, I wanted to say before, so we have like different set of test cases that can be used for testing your DPU and underlay support. Because, so currently we already have those test cases, and there is a PTF test cases that Intel has been attributed into the SAI repo. So there is already underlay test cases. You can take it and use it.
Right, yeah. Don't run them on the BMV2 model for Dash, though, because they won't work.
Yeah, if BMV2 has support, so we can run it. But
no, but unless somebody volunteers to do that, it won't.
Yeah.
So at the moment, we have that, and yes, it can be run via using BMV2 or real hardware. But for the Dash pipeline to be supported in BMV2 and the test cases that we are writing that are applicable to both real hardware and BMV2. That
so
is.
Can you give an example of underlay only test?
No. What I'm saying is that underlay is like a separate topic where whatever we have contributed, it works on a SmartNIC sort of a device, so it can be tested on real hardware. It can be used to test real hardware as well as BMV2 if needed. But this topic is very specific to Dash, and whatever is needed for Dash, we just focused here to implement that part, including the underlay that's needed. That's it.
In other words, what's the minimum underlay support?
Minimum underlay support.
Overlay support. Yeah.
For Dash.
If we want to test overlay, what's the minimum underlay support we need so the test can run unaltered, right?
Yeah, so right now on today's call, we just trying to discuss the routing, basic routing that we need for the Dash. But yes, so the same question will come up for any other underlay features also. And we, during the, let's say, adapting the underlay test cases for the IPU, so we asked this question, and we have some table on the high-level design on the Dash with a list of, let's say, some underlay attributes and features that needs to be supported. So it's currently, this is the only one source of information where.
Can you share your screen with that so we can all look at it?
It's part of Sonic design.
Yes, part of Sonic design. Yeah, so 1 second, I will share my screen and will show to everyone. So let's open the second. So do you see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it is somewhere over here, like a general, what it looks like, and HLD looks like here, high-level design. So where is the pipeline? So the container, okay, over here. So underlay and CSS. So this is the list of attributes, underlay attribute that needs to be, let's say, supported by your DPU, as we understand. Okay, like neighbor, policer, port attributes, router interfaces. As we can see, there is only a very small piece of attributes, route switch, and that's it. But right now we are talking just about the routing, just to be able to write a test case that will, run on the BMV2, and then without any modification will be running on the real hardware. So at this moment, we actually don't need to implement everything in the BMV2, like host interfaces, but the
host interface is not really about BMV2. It's
I understand. It's for the hardware.
The fact is, somehow we need to decouple routing from Dash. It's from, your VNet. I mean, all the stuff that BMV2 is testing right now, right? Because there's no way to deal with ECMP as a whole. That's huge. So we need to be able to encap the packet, and maybe for test cases, we plug a simple DMAC write or maybe a simple writing, next hop writing. But we need a way to maybe send the packet as is to a port that is connected to a real router that will actually do all the writing functionality that need to be done. Right? There needs to be a model of how we connect things to those blocks together. Because we don't got to rewrite routing, right?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is more related to a smart switch. But then again, there are different SAIs even in the smart switch software architecture. The switch SAI is separate from the DPU SAI, and the full routing with the uplinks, downlinks, etc. you configure on switch SAI, and then
right. So I guess
overlay on DPU SAI.
Sorry, we encap the packet. Where do we stop? Having test cases and doing a little bit more, that's one thing, but functionally, from a requirement standpoint, where do we stop for Dash?
Yeah, right. So requirements are very simple. Just send whatever port you want for Underlay. Put the right MAC address for that port.
Based on a simple next hop lookup?
Ports have the same, not the same next hops, but yeah, you can kind of simplify the next hops, neighbors, and all that. You can kind of compress them.
I don't want to simplify. I want to know what it is. Source MAC will be, because we route the packet. Well, I guess maybe we could switch.
Source MAC is always the same.
The source MAC or DMAC could be anything.
So the source MAC should be like of the. So
source MAC is the switch attribute. It will be configured by the control plane or by the test.
In the switch attribute, or it should be source MAC of the router interface?
Switch attribute is enough. I don't think we need to support per router interface. Sonic doesn't do that.
Yeah, 1 second, because why I'm asking this, because on this is the list of attributes, so I saw the source MAC address here. So I assume that this actual MAC address should be used for as a source MAC of the packet.
Is there a MAC address on the switch?
This is the MAC. Yeah, there is. There is also the source MAC address of the switch and source address.
Probably it's redundant. Yeah, this one is redundant.
Router interface is redundant?
Router interface MAC, yeah.
Okay, so it looks like okay, so maybe I will open the issue on this stuff if this field is redundant, so we can, for everyone, make it clear that the source MAC address should be the MAC address of the switch. In this case, we can also fix the test cases correctly. And again, there is another question about the destination, so it should be resolved based on the next hop and neighbor, right?
So destination. So I'm still confused here, and I apologize for this. I'm trying to figure out for the Dash data plane in the hardware, not the BMV2, but in the real product. We put an encap on the packet for the VNet to VNet case. We know what port the packet came in on. Do we need to do an LPM lookup on the destination IP of the encap we just put on and do routing on that?
Yeah.
Is that the intention?
Yeah. But the problem is that 100% of the time you will end up with the result that you have ECMP of both ports. Like any LPM lookup will result in the ECMP group that contains both ports. And then you can choose according to hashing whichever of these ports, and that's it. So this,
you don't want that part of Dash data plane. That's impossible.
I'm not saying that we need it in BMV2. BMV2
No, forget BMV2. I'm saying functionally wise. It's huge. Would you support 4-level ECMP? You know, all those things, right?
It's part of the Dash feature set.
But how does that
Isn't
work with HA when you're trying to have one port going to one switch, another port going to another switch, and you want them to stay on those ports? Why would you ECMP?
What do you mean? Why would you ECMP?
Well, if you look at the serious appliance, when you have the HA topology, you have a 2-port device, an appliance, and you have one port going to switch A and another port going to switch B. Why would you ECMP the outbound packets? Don't you want them to go back to the same switch? Or do you want
it can be the same switch. My point is it doesn't matter.
if the switch fails, then that ECMP group, you have one port down?
Then all the traffic goes to the other port.
Logically, you got a bunch of tables to configure switching. It's again, basic routing is not just next hop. Sorry, basic routing is next hop, and that can be done. But a full RPM with BGP and all those things, I mean, you know, you find those on full routers, and they're huge.
Ask Microsoft if they require it. If they don't, they can remove it from the Dash requirements.
That's what I asked for, actual requirements on once we encap the packet, like Bud mentioned, we got to figure out the DMAC. What is that based on? That's all I'm asking.
According to the current Dash spec, I think it's full routing. If Microsoft doesn't need it, ask them to remove it from their Dash requirements.
And I think if they want routing, I think there needs to be a way to send a packet, that packet to port somehow or to a process or something that, I don't know exactly, it depends on the hardware, I suppose, but that actually does a full routing functionality. You send it to a port and that gets offloaded for full routing.
Yeah, but my point is there is no way, if you're looking from the outside, there is no way for you to know if the Dash appliance is doing the full routing. Even if you will send the packet to the same port it came from, it's still correct. So you can compress everything and not do the full routing. Still will be a correct behavior.
So, Marianne, since you're saying what is the correct behavior, can we have a bit of write-up on exactly how you envision this to be working? It can be later included in the HLD too, but I think for this group it will be very useful to just resolve this current question that we have.
No, I mean, I'm saying again, that there is a definition of the routing in SAI behavioral model, in Underlay SAI behavioral model. The caveat here is that we have such a simple network topology that there can be some assumptions made.
Can we get a clear picture of the simple topology, right? I mean, I guess that's what it boils down to. What is the deployment case? So we can actually figure out those shortcuts. Because for me, it's, when I read what's highlighted there, it's like, well, resolve the neighbor. That doesn't mean anything. I mean, it's just me.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, so simple topology is 2 ports connected to gateways. Both of them have default route, and that's it.
So, I mean, I'm hearing like things that might be, well, to me appear conflicting. On the one hand, some folks are saying we need to do full routing. And at the same time, I'm hearing, but whatever routing is configured, due to the topology, it just boils down to sending the packet out the interface it came in on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not sure, those two things aren't the same.
Well, one's more work than the other and more complicated. The other one's much simpler. And the authoritative answer is Microsoft from the requirements.
Yeah, so
I don't think we have representative here
I
today.
think that the thing here is that Sonic doesn't know that if you have a simplified routing, you send to the same port, or you actually decide to do ECMP and calculate the hash and all that. The Sonic will configure the same APIs, and that's where Volodymyr's concern about the test came from.
Yes.
Now the question is, what would be, assuming we have this configuration, what would be the correct behavior? And the correct behavior is it doesn't matter if we really do ECMP or if we send the packet on the same port it came from, or like send a packet on the other port. Always doesn't matter as long as this configuration is preserved.
Finding the proper DMAC and Ethernet header is key, though, right?
Yeah, but DMAC comes from the egress port eventually.
No,
Yeah, from the
if you're routing, that's just, well, I don't.
Your neighbor is your egress port if you're routing in this case.
Yeah. So let's say if you're talking about the topology, so currently the PDF test cases that we have in the dash, so they assume that we have a very simple topology. So just, you know, when the host with two NICs connected with your device, with two ports, and currently we even send the traffic from one port to another port, but I think it.
But that's the physical topology.
Yeah, it's physical topology. We are doing just simple testing.
Yes, but your test assumes some kind of like intended network topology that you're trying to simulate. It's not the host connected to the DPU.
No. So I think that in this moment for us is I mean for us, like for the PDF testing, so it's a key to assume that the traffic will go to the one port and back from the same, right? But for the real use case, so yeah, we definitely will need CMP and all the.
How will the test be different? Like you should expect packet to come from any of two ports.
Again,
whether we should test ECMP or not, probably. Right?
No, you how can you test ECMP if you like don't know the ECMP function?
You have to send enough packets to do a statistical swag at it.
No, that's load balancing. That's not the function. Load balancing or balancing of the ECMP, I think it's out of scope.
Well, at this stage,
because it will be different on each hardware.
Yes.
At least we will know that the next hop group has two ports, right? I mean, whatever is needed and understood as the intended behavior, then when we record it, then we add test cases to test all of those aspects, right?
Yeah, but you cannot write a test case saying, I expect a packet to come from this exact port.
That is correct. Agree.
You could send large numbers of packets and do a statistical look at them and make sure that it's not all in one port. I mean, we've done tests like this at line rate. So yeah, one packet at a time, not helpful. Sending many packets with large numbers of incrementing fields, etc., to get entropy, you can do some tests.
Yeah, I think that's even.
And you're saying those kind of tests are only applicable to hardware, right? Not for the BMV2.
Yeah, they're not testing for correctness.
Yeah, but for hardware, you can do those things. We do that all the time. I'm still a little bit hung up on that. When someone was sharing their screen, where that paragraph below the table of attributes said, you know, the DPU will do ECMP towards the two TORs, but where are the attributes in the table above that let you set those ECMP groups? You know, the Swiss Lite table of attributes didn't seem to have things to configure ECMP. So is there just maybe a typo in that paragraph and the ECMP part should be deleted? I mean, don't we?
Workagent has already, like, it's just inherited implementation from the switch to configure this, but to configure ECMP. Same AppDB schema, same SAI APIs.
Can we look at that screenshot again? Because there was a table of underlay light attributes, and I didn't see specifically. That's the whole point of this table, is to show which subset we need to support. So if it's not in that table,
Then
then
it should be added.
or that paragraph should be changed to remove ECMP. I mean, either one would make them consistent, right?
This one?
Yeah, when it says "and does ECMP routing," if we deleted those 4 words, our lives would be simpler.
And we'll just do next
No,
hop.
because there is a real life requirement, Chris.
I
Okay,
saw
well,
the
that's what I'm
ECMP
saying.
in few places. Yeah, Chris,
Then this
so-
document needs to be amended so that the attributes are in the table.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. This document doesn't seem to be self-consistent.
Yeah, sure, of course. I agree with that.
Yeah, we shouldn't we shouldn't have to say things like, well, it inherits them from the regular, Sonic requirements. The point of this document is to specify specifically, so, otherwise people will get caught off guard, implement everything in here and think they're done. So we probably need to file an issue.
Yeah. I think
Okay.
there is a.
Yeah, we don't want,
issues.
we don't want, yeah, we don't.
Just open a pull request. Add
Or-
next subgroup member.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Miriam, do you know if there is any issue that we can use it for discussion? I mean, to agree the list of attributes, let's say, needs to be added to the BMV2.
Sorry, I didn't get the question. Can you rephrase it?
I mean, do we have any issue that we can use on the GitHub ticket ID where we can, continue discussion what exactly?
I don't think so.
Okay,
No,
so
I'm just explaining the motivation where this table came from. So we looked at the org agent implementation. We assumed that with the required configuration, such and such attributes will be called. We missed, I guess, ECMP, maybe something else. There is no issue. It was just added based on the org agent implementation that we have. That's how this table came out to be.
But org agent implementation, you're talking about the org agent. So do we have somewhere already? I mean, upstream or not?
Yeah, Sonic org agent.
Oh, you're
Sonic
talking
is
about the regular. Okay.
Yeah.
Can
So
we
the
pick up?
kind of
Yes.
the thought process is the following. We have a real life topology, right? A DPU connected to 2 switches, blah, 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 BGP running there. Based on that, we know that, based on this, we know which AppDB tables will be populated in the underlay Sonic. Based on that, we know which SAI APIs will org agent call and which attributes we need to support. So kind of the source of truth is the topology. And from there, we are trying to derive everything else.
For the previous topic, want to summarize because it's 10:57 and we will probably need to continue this in the next meeting. Just to summarize, as next steps for the previous topic, maybe it is good to add a line in the list saying list of items to-do list for BMV2 saying the next hop MAC address portion of the routing for dash pipeline needs work, or basically add that into the one of the lists.
The pipeline and the libsci support.
Yeah, and the libsci support. Sure. Okay, that sounds great. any other topics and some notes that you really would like me to capture, please do send it to me. And I will capture that and send it to Christina. I have my own notes, but if you like something specific to be added, please send it to me.
Yeah, thanks, Rishma. I know I don't talk very often in the meetings. Just want to introduce myself again as Youssef, joining new on the Cirrus Dash team. Rishma, I have some notes to send over. I'll be sending you those offline and we can kind of connect on those. Also want to give a heads up for everybody. I think we're gonna, the next time we kind of all get back together for the work group, a weekly meeting, we're gonna do like just a quick review of the project queue and a lot of those a little bit of those action items haven't been looked at in a few months. So just want to get an update just from you all and kind of get a little bit of feedback to see if we can take some things off or just update a few of those line orders. But just want to say thank you for everybody just hopping on the call, and thanks Chris and Rishma for starting off the call for me. Kind of hopped on late there, was in a previous meeting, but just want to say thanks to everybody.
Hi, thank you, Youssef, and nice to meet you. Look forward
Yes.
to hearing more from you and working with you here.
Marianne, what about the filing? Thanks, Youssef. About filing an issue against the Sonic HLD spec. Do you want to do that, or you want one of us to take that?
I mean, why file issue if we know what we need to do? Why not just add a few rows to the table and create a pull request and be done with it?
Okay, I don't know which attribute to add, so it'd be nice to have an issue just to make sure it doesn't get dropped.
I think that
Well,
for ICMP, Chris, would be great for the record, just to have kind of issue, because we actually don't know the exact
I'll file an
specific
issue.
attributes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and
for the MAC
Volodymyr
address,
also was saying he wants to file some issue. Was it the same issue?
for the
or-
MAC address, I think that's if
Yeah.
the one line, I will
Okay.
remove one line and that just explain, Miriam, so you can take a look
Yeah.
about the MAC address, so we can remove.
Okay,
At least
thank you,
discuss.
everyone. We are over time, and I have another presentation actually, so I will drop. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
All right, thanks everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, bye-bye.